Hi, this is Nanette Tosenfeld with the Great Basin Fire Potential Briefing for Wednesday, July 22nd, 2020. Looking at fire potential impacts over the next few days, things are looking pretty interesting. Today we are looking at a combination of gusty winds and thunderstorms across the area. Thunderstorms further east will be mostly wet. We are seeing increasing moisture across the eastern part of the Great Basin. However, as you move further north and west, those storms will become more of a mix of wet and dry thunderstorms. We're also concerned about winds in the 25 to 35 mile an hour range, along with low relative humidities this afternoon across the orange highlighted areas. And this is significant because we have seen an increase in fire activity in those areas, and so gusty winds could be an issue for those fires. As we move into Thursday, we will see another day of showers and thunderstorms. The majority of the thunderstorms across the area will be wet. You can see those areas highlighted in green for Thursday. There is a portion of Idaho that we are expecting to see some coverage with mixed wet and dry thunderstorms. Winds are also a concern on Thursday. You can see the orange highlighted areas across portions of Nevada, Utah, and the Arizona Strip that could see those gusty winds combined with low relative humidity. And again, this is significant due to the thunderstorm activity that we've seen in those areas and the recent fire activity. As we move into Friday, we're looking at more isolated storms. You can see there'll be mainly a mix of wet and dry and not as much coverage as we are expecting to see today and tomorrow. Over the past 24 hours, we have seen a fair amount of precipitation across the area. You can see a large portion of the Great Basin has seen storm activity. Generally, those storms have been drier across the northern and western portions of the Great Basin. The lightning map on the right shows a fair amount of lightning coverage over parts of Nevada and also into Utah, but not quite as widespread as what we saw in Nevada. Looking at fire activity across the Great Basin, there has been an increase in activity. You can see quite a few fires on the map, and the significant thing is the fires across western Utah and into the central and southern half of Nevada, where we are expecting to see gusty winds and low relative humidity today and tomorrow. It's been very dry across the Great Basin over the past 1 and 2 weeks. Things are starting to change a bit. You can see across eastern, southeastern Utah, there has been some recent precipitation there, but really dry elsewhere across the Great Basin and well below normal. ERCs are still quite high across the Great Basin. Even with the moisture we've seen, ERCs across the southern and southeastern part of the Great Basin are still in the 80th to 97th percentile. Further north into Utah, where the moisture hasn't been quite as deep, we're now looking at ERCs above the 97th percentile. And then moving further north into Idaho, things are beginning to transition from green into the yellow and orange category. Continuing to look at ERCs, GB16, which is in southwestern Nevada, has been setting records the past few days. GB31 in southeastern Utah, even with the precipitation we've seen over there, is at record levels. We are expecting to see those ERCs begin to come down over the next few days, especially across the southeastern part of the area where moisture is deepest, but those ERCs still are pretty high for the time of year. 10-hour fuel moisture is beginning to come up across the southeastern part of the area where we have seen those thunderstorms, but further north and west across the Great Basin, we are still looking at pretty dry 10-hour fuels. Live fuel moisture is quite low. You can see the sagebrush generally below 120%, down to 100% in most areas, meaning that sagebrush is ready to burn. It will contribute to fire activity and also well below normal across many areas. Satellite this morning shows quite a bit of moisture in place across the Great Basin. You can see pretty extensive cloud cover across much of Utah and into Nevada, and that is indicative of the deep moisture that is in place across the south and southeastern part of the Great Basin. For today, quite a bit of moisture in place across the eastern part of the Great Basin. The thing that really stands out on our fire potential map is that large area of high risk for lightning. We are quite concerned about the potential for dry lightning across portions of the Great Basin today. And further south, there is the threat for gusty winds with low relative humidity. Looking at today in more detail, we are expecting pretty widespread coverage of storms across the area, as you can see from the image on the left. And on the right, you can see that area of gusty winds across southern Nevada and southwestern Utah that is expected. As we move into Thursday, still looking at moisture remaining in place across the eastern part of the Great Basin. That's showing up on our significant fire potential map with some of those PSAs beginning to turn green and highlighting the gusty winds again for tomorrow afternoon. If we look at those winds in more detail, you can see that area of winds across western Utah, eastern Nevada, and the Arizona Strip, generally in the 25 to 35 mile an hour range tomorrow afternoon. Moisture will continue to remain across the Great Basin into Thursday, and you can see the areas on the map on the left that are expected to see that storm activity on Thursday. Moving into Friday, that low pressure system moving to our north will continue to push drier air into the western part of the Great Basin, and we will see a continuation of storms across the east. However, with drier air moving in, the storm coverage will be much less than what we're going to see today and tomorrow. And looking at that in more detail, again, you can see not quite the coverage of storms on Friday that we'll see the next few days. And winds will still be elevated, but not quite as strong as what we're expecting to see the next few days. The exception to that is a small area of gusty winds across southeastern Idaho that we do see the potential for on Friday. Those, again, would be in that 25 to 35 mile an hour range. Over the next 3 days, definitely much more precipitation than what we've seen over the Great Basin over the past few weeks. Pretty good amounts expected across the higher terrain of central Utah. You can see some areas expected to receive up to an inch of precipitation. As we move into Saturday, we're looking at some lingering moisture. We could see some thunderstorms pop up across a higher terrain, but not too much moisture in place on Saturday. And then moving into Sunday, pretty similar weather pattern. As we move into Monday, we get a little increase in moisture across the eastern part of the Great Basin. We could see an uptick in wetter storms across the eastern part of the area on Monday. And then finally moving into Tuesday, again, a pretty similar pattern. Over the next 7 days, again, pretty good amounts of precipitation across the central and southeastern part of the area. Finally seeing that monsoon make its appearance, make its way into the area. Finally, in the 8 to 14 day outlook, the Climate Prediction Center is calling for above normal temperatures across the entire area. They are hinting that return of the monsoon might not be as stout as we had hoped for, hinting at some possible dryness across the southeastern part of the area towards the end of the month. So that's it for the briefing. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. Our information is on the screen, and you can also find us on Twitter. Thank you.